American Top 40.
Here's another debut record coming in at 38. 26-year-old fella from Mobile, Alabama. His name is Jimmy Buffett. His song, Come Monday.
Heading up.
American Top 40.
At number 21 on American Top 40 this week, a song that's been around for 5 weeks by a man who, while he was living in Nashville, Tennessee, covered the music scene there for Billboard magazine. Today he makes his home in Key West, Florida, and he sings about Margaritaville.
American Top 40.
Well, now on AT40, I have the hit by the man who walked where he shouldn't have and got beat up for it by a national hero. This is the story of Jimmy Buffett, a singer and songwriter and storyteller who's been telling this crazy story since it happened 3 years ago. He was in Nashville recording an album and had just finished cutting a song called God's Own Drunk. And in that very same condition, he decided to call it a night and go out and have some fun. So he and his drummer, Sammy Creason, staggered out to the parking lot to find their rented car. But they couldn't find it. So they both climbed up somehow onto the hood of another car to look around. And along came the owner, standing 6'6", shoulders half that wide, and looking very upset to find two strangers stomping dents into his hood. Now, Jimmy says he didn't recognize the big man. He had no idea that the car they were standing on belonged to former Tennessee Sheriff Buford Pusser, the hero of Walking Tall. And when Mr. Pusser told them to get off, they didn't. They gave him a bad time. And Buford, in Jimmy's words, beat the hell out of both of us. He followed them to their car, says Jimmy, still swinging. And while Jimmy was trying to start the car, Sammy was fighting Buford off by stabbing at his fist with a big ballpoint pen. But the car wouldn't start because they didn't have their seat belts fastened. So there sat Jimmy, twisting the key while the ignition switch buzzed, and thinking, oh man, I don't want to die in Nashville in a rented Gremlin. And that's how Jimmy Buffett ends the story of his crime and punishment.
American Top 40.
This is Kasem on AT40 in Hollywood, and now for the man who used to perform with an imaginary band so realistically his audiences thought he'd gone bananas. This wild and crazy guy is Jimmy Buffett, and back in the days before he started hitting the top 40, he really couldn't afford to hire a backup band for his stage shows, so Jimmy did the next best thing. He pretended he had musicians. He'd actually start his show by introducing the members of his invisible band to the audience. He'd talk to the band in between numbers and count off so they could start each tune together. And by the end of the evening, the people who had watched the show would go home never really sure if they'd been watching a clever act or someone who'd gone over the edge. Well, any fan of Jimmy and his music could tell you he may be crazy, but he's no fool. The invisible band was fun for the audience and a crutch for Jimmy in his salad days. For the past couple of years now, Jimmy has had a real band behind him, and they go by the name Coral Reefers. Debuting at number 37 this week on American Top 40, here is Jimmy Buffett and Cheeseburger in Paradise.
Tried to amend my carnivorous habits.
American Top 40.
This is Kasem in Hollywood, and now our story about the two rock stars who found out the hard way that once you make it, there's no getting away from your music or your fans. The leader of the Eagles, Glenn Frey, and his buddy, solo star Jimmy Buffett, learned that lesson a couple of years ago. They were in Los Angeles working on their albums separately, and they just got fed up with the whole music scene. They had to get away for a while. So the two friends hopped a fast plane to Key West, Florida, where Jimmy Buffett kept his 50-foot sailboat, the Euphoria. They weighed anchor and sailed east for 2 days and 2 nights. Finally, beyond the far end of the Bahama Islands chain, they pulled into a peaceful cove in the tiny Caicos Islands. There were a couple of other sailboats moored there, but that was it. No cities or towns, no crowds, no telephones, no microphones, no concerts or recording studios, and no fans. Nothing to remind these stars of what they wanted to get away from. Well, as the setting sun announced the beginning of the cocktail hour, Jimmy Buffett and Eagles leader Glenn Frey climbed into the sailboat's dinghy and rowed over to the nearest of the other boats to visit. And they were welcomed aboard by several strangers who had an 8-track tape player and only 2 tapes. A Jimmy Buffett album and an Eagles album, which they played one after the other the rest of the night. It may be a cliche, but it's a small, small world. At number 36, here is Jimmy Buffett with Fins.
She came down.
America's Top 40.
22 years ago this week, back in 1977, one of the top hits in the USA was by a best-selling novelist, restaurateur, and clothing manufacturer who also records the occasional song. There's little that Jimmy Buffett hasn't done in his life. He has a college degree in history and journalism. He's the owner of the Margaritaville restaurant and clothing store in Key West, Florida. He's the author of a best-selling children's book called The Jolly Man and a best-selling collection of short stories called Tales from Margaritaville. He's written a musical with Glenn Frey called Rules of the Road, and he's hit the chart with songs that include one of the top hits in the USA 22 years ago this week. Here's Jimmy Buffett with Margaritaville.
Casey's Coast to Coast.
Now, what's Jimmy Buffett up to these days? Well, he's making a fortune in Margaritaville. Jimmy Buffett has given us vacation-friendly anthems like Margaritaville and Cheeseburger in Paradise. But there's a lot more than music in Jimmy Buffett's world. He's also the creator of the Cheeseburger in Paradise restaurant chain with 44 branches bringing in $80 million a year. Then there's the Margarita line of frozen foods, tequilas, and mixers, and his deck shoes and flip-flops are among the top brands in America. But that's not all. Jimmy is also building a hotel and casino in Biloxi, Mississippi, and he's calling it, what else? Margaritaville. That's our update on Jimmy Buffett, the king of Margaritaville and of music that's full of summer fun.
The hit.